When I say the word obey, what does it make you think of? Do you think of a robot?
Who has no choices and just makes bleeps and bloops all day long.
Or do you think of a puppy who has to be told to sit and stay and lie down and shake? Good dog. Or maybe you think of a really strict adult who's always telling you what to do and when to do it. The word obey brings a lot of different things to mind. And kids are expected to obey a lot of different rules and a lot of different people. When you're obeying, you're doing what someone else has said is right, right? You're following someone else's plan. So when you're obeying God, you're doing what He says is right. You're following His plan. You know what? We need a little backstory here. The short version of a much longer story is that God created a perfect world. It was good. He made people. It was very good. Then people disobeyed God. The world wasn't perfect anymore. But the good news is that God still loved His creation, including people. And He gives us the choice to follow Him, to choose to love Him, to choose to obey Him. Now, just because obeying God is a good thing doesn't mean it's an easy thing. Sometimes it's hard to obey. Sometimes it feels like you're doing things that don't make sense. Sometimes it feels like you don't know where you're going or where you'll end up. Sometimes it's just something you don't want to do. So sometimes it's hard to obey. And sometimes it might seem kind of easy to obey. Why is that? Well, it might have something to do with you. Maybe you had your favorite breakfast and your hair is looking good and the sun is shining and everything is awesome. Or maybe the thing you're being asked to do is something you wanted to do anyway. Like liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more cool stuff. Go ahead, I'll wait. Or maybe some days are easier to obey because you know that God has a plan. And you can trust Him, and He never makes mistakes, and He wants good things for you. So why wouldn't you want to obey a God like that? There's a story in the Bible that shows us a lot about obedience. Let's take a look at it.
So here's where we are in the story. The Israelites had been slaves for years and years, and they wanted out. So they cried out to God, "Rescue us!" But Pharaoh wouldn't let them go. No. So God sent some trouble to Pharaoh. First, God turned the Egyptians' river to blood, but that didn't work on Pharaoh. No. Then he made frogs invade Egypt. There were frogs everywhere. No. Then God sent zillions of gnats and flies, but still Pharaoh wouldn't let the Israelites go. No. So God decided to punish Pharaoh more. He sent sickness and horrible boils to appear on people's skin. No! But still Pharaoh didn't obey. So God sent hailstones, that's pieces of ice, falling from the sky. Next, He sent a swarm of locusts. Now those were like the flies and gnats, only these guys ate all the food in Egypt. And still Pharaoh said, nah. Next was complete darkness. No light. And finally God told Pharaoh that if he didn't obey and let the Israelites go, all of the firstborn in Egypt would die. Unless lamb's blood had been painted on the family's doorpost. That did it. When Pharaoh's son died because Pharaoh didn't obey, the leader finally said to the Israelites, "Go." So that very night, the Israelites left. They didn't know which way to go or where they were headed, but God had promised them something. He said, "I will show you a new way, a new land, and a new home." So, to help them out, God sent a huge cloud for the Israelites to follow. A cloud and a pillar of smoke stretched up to the sky. During the day, the cloud shaded them from the heat in the desert. and at night it glowed with warmth to keep them safe and warm while they slept. When it was time to move, the cloud moved in front of them. And when it was time to rest, the cloud stopped. The Israelites walked and walked and walked until God led his people through the desert to the edge of a great sea. They were wondering, how will we cross the water? When suddenly they heard the sound of thundering and pounding. It sounded like horse hooves. Pharaoh had changed his mind again. He wanted the Israelites back, and now Pharaoh's army was chasing after the Israelites. The Israelites didn't know what to do. They were stuck with a giant sea in front of them and an army behind them, and it was coming fast. They panicked. The water was too deep to walk through and too far and long to swim through. They didn't have boats or horses, and the soldiers were getting closer and closer and closer. But Moses told them, God will make a way for us to escape. And then something strange happened, something they had never seen before. The cloud moved behind the people and hid them from the Egyptians. God told Moses to raise his hands and his staff, and God sent a strong wind to blow on the water. The wind blew all night long. It blew some of the water to the left and some to the right until there were two towering walls of water, and right in the middle was dry land. The Israelites took a step, and another step, and another step, until all of the Israelites had walked right through, right where all those enormous waves had been. God had rescued the Israelites again, and it wouldn't be the last time he did that. God would save them again, once and for all. But that comes later. And I can't wait for you to hear that story.
Whoa, that story talks a lot about obedience and disobedience. God wanted his people to be set free, and he made it really clear to Pharaoh. But Pharaoh just wouldn't obey God, and because of that, he suffered a lot. And Moses was scared and being chased by an entire army, and when God told him to lift up his hand and that he would let the Israelites cross on dry land, Moses obeyed. He followed all of what God said, even when it seemed impossible, even when it seemed crazy. But nothing is impossible for God. Moses did everything God said. God was really specific about what to do with the Israelites, where to go and what to do once he got to the river with everyone. God doesn't always give us as many details as he gave Moses, but God still talks to us today.
I know I heard from God once when I had a thought that was totally different than what I'd been thinking, and it really encouraged me to keep going. I was on a camping trip one time, and we had hiked and worked the whole day. We were going to sleep outside and then hike and work the whole next day. I was feeling really bad about myself. I felt weak, I wasn't keeping up with other people, and didn't think I could keep going. As I laid down that night to go to sleep, I was thinking those things when a thought popped in my head that said, I am strong and I am capable. I realized that thought was from God because it was totally different than what I'd been thinking. I'd been thinking I was weak, but I'm strong and I'm capable. He made me that way. And I knew that thought was from God because it encouraged me to keep going. I got up the next day and hiked and worked, and I felt great.
Yeah, so one of the ways that I feel like God speaks to me is in nature. And there's this one time that I was going on this hike and I just felt very overwhelmed. And just less than a quarter of a mile into the hike, there was this turtle on the path. And turtles are slow. They're also not very friendly animals. They run away from humans. So the fact that there was this turtle placed on this path was, I felt like God was telling me to just slow down. And to be with him in this hike. And so I knew it was God because immediately after that thought entered my mind, I just got this sense of peace.
Once I knew God was speaking to me when I was dreaming, actually, and through scripture that he brought into my dream.
One time I knew God was speaking to me when I was at camp with all my friends. There was a great big water slide there, and my friend Jacob, who uses a wheelchair, had never been down a water slide in his life. And all of a sudden, I felt this great big tug and nudge in my heart to take Jacob down a water slide. So we were able to get some help, and we got Jacob up to the tippy top of the water slide, and I laid down and we laid Jacob on me, and together we flew down into the lake and everyone cheered. And man, I'd never seen Jacob so excited, and I know that God wanted me to do that. We had so much fun.
I knew I heard from God once when he woke me up in the morning and reminded me about a friend, and so I prayed for her.
Once I knew God was speaking to me when I went to a job interview and he told me, don't take that job.
One time I heard from God was after I tried something new and failed at it. It's not a great feeling when we try new things and they don't turn out the way that we think they should. And when I went to college, it did not turn out the way that I thought it should. My first year was really hard. I struggled with being away from home, with my classes, with my homework, and I ended up leaving and going back home. I kind of felt like a failure, like a quitter. But after a while, something really cool happened. I started to get this feeling that I should go back and try again. And then people around me that I trusted, that were my friends, they started to tell me that they thought I should go back and try again too. And they also told me that I wasn't a failure just because I failed, but that I was so much more than that God saw me as so much more than that. You see, God uses people to communicate to us sometimes. He uses them to encourage us, to give us help and wisdom. And he also uses things like the Bible. The Bible's full of stories of people getting second chances and God telling them that he sees them as more than their mistakes. So I heard from God and I ended up going back and trying again. And it was so much better the second time around. When God's talking to us, amazing things can happen if we listen.
Whoa, did you hear what they just said? They heard from God and they obeyed what they thought he was saying. And when they obeyed God, they were showing him they love him. Now, you've been watching me build something this whole episode. You don't know what it is, but you probably thought you'd find out eventually. Well, now's the moment. This is a marble run. This marble is going to start here and make its way all the way over here. But it has to go through lots of obstacles. It can't go backwards, it just has to follow the course. Now, marbles don't have any problems with trust. They don't even have brains. But if they did, they'd be even smaller than a squirrel's brain, which is really, really small, which is probably why they do things like run on power lines and jump from really, really, really high trees. And okay, the point is, this marble doesn't have to choose to obey. It just follows the track. It might be nice if that was what it was like for us too, but we get to choose. We get to choose to obey God. We get to choose to love God. And sometimes there are twists and turns and obstacles, but God is always good, and we can always trust that he wants good things for us. And you know what? Sometimes we mess up, even when we're trying to obey. God is full of love and grace. That means he still loves us even when we mess up, and he gives us more than one chance to make the right choice or take the right path. The good news is that when we obey God over and over again, it becomes a habit. We get used to listening to God and doing what he says again and again. And all those little times that we obey God add up to a life of hearing God and doing what he says. And when we're listening to God like that and really good at obeying him, he can do some incredible things with our lives. It's sort of like dominoes. If every time you listen to God and obey him, it's like one domino falling, but obeying over and over and over and over again and over, it's even better. And remember, sometimes we mess up, and that's okay. You can just start obeying again. So yeah, obeying over and over again is awesome. And you know what's cooler than that? A lifetime of hearing from God and doing what he says. Maybe that could look something like this.
Hey, I'm Abby, and I made this massive domino train. As I was placing each domino, I was thinking of a time that I heard from God and obeyed. It's pretty cool what God does in our lives when we hear from Him and obey and make a habit of obeying what He tells us. Let's see what this domino train does.
3, 2, 1.
You can do this too. Here's what you'll need: